UFC 295 betting and DraftKings show. We have 13 fights this Saturday night. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the featherweight division, we have Jamall Emmers, a minus 258 favorite. The comeback on Dennis Bazoukian is plus 210. And we'll start on the Emmers side. It's always a concern when we see him as a sizable favorite because we do have concerns about the durability. He's been finishing 4 of his 7 professional losses, but in terms of his skill set, I think he's clearly the rightful favorite here. He's a much better striker on the feet. He's going to mix in the leg kicks. He keeps a high pace on the feet as well, and he has that collegiate wrestling background that he can revert to. Now, on the flip side, Bazoukian's previous Contender Series fighter, fought twice on Contender Series, wasn't awarded the contract, and he's kind of just like a middling level fighter. Like, I'm not even sure he should be in the UFC. He trains out of Weidman and Longo in New York with guys like Matt Frevola, who's also on this card, Aljamain Sterling, Merab Dvalishvili. But it's clear that he's just a body for those guys to train with, because in terms of his skill set, he doesn't really have much, to be honest with you. In a matchup like this, he's just going to be outgunned on the feet, and against lower level guys, he was able to mix in the wrestling and grappling. He's just not going to be able to do that at the UFC level, especially against a guy like Jamall Emmers, who has that collegiate wrestling background. We saw Bazoukian come in against Sean Woodson on short notice and get taken down multiple times and controlled by a boxer in Sean Woodson. So that's a terrible look for him here. So as I mentioned, it's always tough to trust a guy like Jamall Emmers as a big favorite, but I really do think he should cruise here. We're going Jamall Emmers by decision. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the flyweight division, we have Joshua Van, a minus 238 favorite. The comeback on Kevin Borchas is plus 195. And this is a fight that was actually scheduled to take place on Contender Series this past season, but Van took a short notice UFC debut fight against Zhalgas Zhumagulov. He ended up winning that by split decision. And Borchas remained on Contender Series, where he did get the victory. And Borchas just seems like a guy who's a very clean striker, comes from that karate style striking background. Most of his wins have come by knockout, but he fought a very low level competition on the regional scene. So I'm just not sure how well that striking is going to translate at the UFC level. I think he's solid. I think he has a future, but I'm just not sure that he has a ceiling at the flyweight division against a guy like Joshua Van, who's very similar in the sense that he's primarily a striker, very young, seems to have a bright future as well. But I think Van has the power, and I think that's going to be the difference here in a fight that I expect both guys to be landing volume, a fight that I expect to play out on the feet for basically all 15 minutes. I just think it's the power of Van that might be able to swing these close rounds. So we're going Van by decision, but in terms of DraftKings, he's pretty expensive, and I just don't really see the ceiling here because I don't think he knocks out Kevin Borchas. So we're going Van by decision, but I'm looking to have an underweight stance and even a little bit of the other side on DraftKings. Next fight up, we have John Castaneda taking on Kyung Ho Kang. This one's at a catch weight of 138. We have Castaneda currently a small favorite at minus 142 with Kang on the comeback at plus 120. And I do like the matchup for Castaneda here. He's a guy who's won 3 of his last 4 fights and has looked very sound at the UFC after not really expecting him to do much when he came into the UFC, to be honest with you. But I do like his skill set here. He keeps a solid pace on the feet. He's just a well-rounded guy, doesn't have really any major weaknesses, and he has a well-rounded ground game as well. Averages just under 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's never been submitted in his career. The one knock on him, I'd say, is his durability. Now, he's not completely chinny or anything, but he has been rocked. He has been knocked out twice in his career. And on the flip side, Kang is primarily a submission grappler. 12 of his 19 wins have come by submission, but we know he has that power in his hands as well. You know, I mentioned the power of Castaneda. Castaneda's landed 4 knockdowns over his last 4 fights. Kyung Ho Kang has landed 4 knockdowns over his last 6 fights. So we know he has the power as well. I think these guys are going to slug it out on the feet for a little bit. Where I struggle with Kang is that he's been able to have extended grappling success against guys that just can't really defend takedowns and can't really defensively grapple. That's not Castaneda. He's not the easiest guy to take down. He's not the easiest guy to submit. So I just think this is going to be one where Castaneda, who I think is going to have the better gas tank down the stretch and the overall better skill set over 15 minutes, is going to be able to take over and potentially break Kang as well in the later rounds. So we're going Castaneda by TKO. That's the official pick. And up next, we have Jared Gordon, a minus 192 favorite. The comeback on Mark Madson is plus 160. And this is one where I am kind of leaning towards the underdog for a couple of reasons. For starters, I just don't think I can trust Jared Gordon at this stage in his career around minus 200 against a legitimate opponent here, considering we've just saw Jared Gordon come off a knockout against Bobby Green. I know it was a DQ due to a head clash. He tried to return way too quick shortly after, and the fight got called off. He's also been knocked out 4 other times in his career, so the durability is always an issue. On top of that, he basically has no finishing upside in his fights. Yes, he can keep a high pace on the feet, mix in the takedowns. We know he has a solid ground game, but he has basically no knockout power, and he's looking to do very little when he takes guys down other than just lay on them. He's not really looking to pass, not looking to submit guys either. In fact, you have to go back 12 UFC fights to the last time Jared Gordon earned a finish. Now, on the flip side, Madson is not this huge finisher either, but I do think he at least has some power, could maybe test the chin of Jared Gordon. I think if either guy's going to finish, and I don't think either guy does, but I do think Madson clearly has more finishing upside here. And then in terms of the matchup, I think Madson's striking is improving. He can give Gordon some fits on the feet. He's still going to be the worst striker, but he can stay competitive there. And then you talk about the grappling. Jared Gordon's the better submission grappler, no doubt, but Mark Madson comes from an Olympic level wrestling background. I'm not convinced that Gordon's just going to get these takedowns for free and just lay on Madson for 10 minutes here and win a decision. And I think the market is really just banking on that happening. So I'm okay with kind of going against that narrative here and leaning into the underdog in Mark Madson in what should be a competitive fight. We're going Madson by decision. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have Nazim Sedzhikov, a minus 135 favorite. The comeback on Vyacheslav Borshov is plus 114. And this is a fun matchup. You guys know I like Sedzhikov. He's a former Contender Series guy, fights out of the southpaw stance, mainly a striker, does have clear power. He wants to move forward and look for an opening to land that big left hand. The issue with Sedzhikov is that we have seen him clipped multiple times dating back to the regional scene. Even in that Contender Series fight, he ate a couple big shots, and then we saw him dropped in the McKinney fight as well. So his striking defense still needs some work, but he does have a pretty well-rounded game. He has shown the ability to clinch guys up, peel them to the ground, mix in that grappling, and that's where I think he's going to have the biggest advantage in this fight against Slavaklaus, who, yes, he's a great striker, former kickboxing guy, has that clear power. We saw that in his last fight against Maheshete, where he was able to counter him, knocked him down multiple times, and earn the finish. That's his upside here, is he can catch Nazim, certainly, if he's not careful. But if Nazim decides to grapple at all, which should be in the game plan here, he's got to look like a sizable favorite to me, because Borchev, we know that's the biggest issue in his game. He only defends takedowns at 35%, and it's not an outlier that he's faced like some great grappler or anything like that. Mike Davis landed 9 takedowns. Diakaze landed 11 takedowns. Dakota Bush landed 2 takedowns. This guy has given up 24 takedowns across his first 4 UFC fights, and then obviously that Maheshete fight, he really didn't even look to take him down. So I think that should be the game plan here for Sedzhikov. If it is, I think he covers his price tag. We're going Sedzhikov by decision. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our next fight. We have Mateusz Rebecki, the biggest betting favorite on the card at minus 550. The comeback on short notice is Roosevelt Roberts at plus 400. And Roberts is coming off a fight on The Ultimate Fighter against Austin Hubbard, where he lost a split decision. He was let go by the UFC back in 2021. And honestly, his striking is pretty solid. I think he could probably hang on the feet, because Rebecki's just kind of sloppy, looking to move forward, duck, and try to wing one of those big overhand lefts while he closes distance. But where I think the biggest advantage is going to be is Rebecki is going to go to the ground. He averages over 3.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. We know once he gets you down, he's got big ground and pound, and he's going to hunt for submissions as well. A guy like Roberts, who that's been historically an issue for him. He only defends takedowns at 58% while he was in the UFC. He does hold the brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it's just not going to be enough. I think Rebecki's going to get the takedowns when he wants them, and I do think he finishes Roberts inside the first 2 rounds here. We're going Rebecki by submission. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the women's strawweight division, we have Lupi Godinez, a minus 170 favorite. The comeback on my girl Tabitha, Baby Shark Ricci, is plus 142. And this is a fight that it seems like basically everybody is backing Godinez here. It seems like she is the mush of the week to me. And I do think she's a solid fighter. She definitely has a future here in the division, but I'm just pushing back a little bit on this narrative that she's just going to steamroll Tabitha Ricci here. You know, Godinez, she's a solid boxer, wants to move forward, can mix in the ground game as well, averages just under 4 takedowns per 15 minutes. But the concern is we've seen her fight IQ be very questionable at times. At times, she's not even interested in grappling. At times, the volume on the feet has not been there either. And there's been multiple times where we're backing her and we're just like, what are we doing here? Like, what is the game plan? And I think that's an issue against someone like Tabitha Ricci, who fights very smart to her strengths. You know, she's not the best fighter on the feet, but her striking is evolving. It's getting better. I still think she has issues defensively, and I worry about the gas tank in round 3 because multiple times we've seen her kind of bank the first 2 rounds and then coast in the third, and I think that could be a problem in what should be a close fight here. If it's 1-1 going into the third, that's where I would probably lean Godinez. But I think Godinez is just being overrated. The grappling narrative is overrated due to a lot of these fighters that she faced that just can't stop a takedown, have no clue how to grapple. Elise Reed is one of the worst defensive grapplers in the division, dating back to a couple other fights. Savannah Gomez-Juarez, same thing. Ariana Carnelosi, powerful on the feet, but can't defend a takedown whatsoever and is a huge gas bag. So I just think she's being billed as like this future contender almost. And then you have Tabitha Ricci, who MMA Twitter seems to hate because she's so one-dimensional. She doesn't have a ton of finishing ability, and she basically is just going to land multiple takedowns, averages over 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, and a lot of people just can't deal with that style. You know, if she takes you down, she can control you, not for the whole round, but, you know, bank a couple minutes, maybe look to pass here and there, not really going to threaten a ton with submissions. And then on the feet, she doesn't have a ton of power, but she is constant with that volume. She can mix in the leg kicks as well. So I could see a scenario where she's just doing a lot more than Godinez. If Godinez isn't going to land those big, powerful shots in the clinch or have any grappling success, I think this fight's going to be a lot closer than people suggest. And I think Ricci's the better submission grappler as well, going to be closer on the feet than a lot of people are making it out to be. So I think it's a clear dog or pass situation. We're going Tabitha Ricci by decision. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our featured bout on the prelims as Steve Erceg comes in as a 185 favorite. The comeback on Alessandro Costa is plus 154. And Costa is actually stepping in on short notice here. Erceg is a favorite, and I was kind of worried seeing the price tag where Erceg, it's one of those classic spots where he outperformed expectation in his UFC debut against David Dvorak, and I've talked about that a couple times in the past, where people who we aren't just really expecting much from just end up looking a lot better than we thought coming into that fight, and then the next fight, they immediately get overvalued in the market, and that's kind of what I thought we were getting here, but then you look at it a little bit more, and even though Costa does have some tools, he's got some power on the feet, he's got vicious leg kicks as well, and I think that's going to be a big advantage for him here. But if he's unable to land that big shot early, I worry about him winning rounds here against a guy like Erceg, who's not the prettiest striker, but he's going to be a lot more active than Costa, especially outside of round 1. And I think the grappling, both guys can kind of have some success in these grappling exchanges. So I lean Erceg. I'd be a little bit more interested in Costa if it were a full camp, but being that it's not and that he probably needs a big moment or potentially a finish early, I am going to lean with Erceg. Reluctantly, we're going Erceg by decision. That's the official pick. Kicking off the pay-per-view card, we have Pat Sabatini, a minus 120 favorite. The comeback on Diego Lopez is plus 100. And I like the Pat Sabatini side. No surprise, I'm going to be backing the Philly fighter in this matchup. But in terms of the stylistic matchup, I do think it's a favorable one for him here, where Diego Lopez is coming off a submission victory. We know that's not a secret with him. He's a very dangerous submission grappler. He gave Movsar Evloev just about all he can handle on short notice in his UFC debut. But the downside of Lopez is he's a guard player. He's going to give up the takedowns. We've seen him get controlled for extended periods on the mat, dating back to that Contender Series fight a couple of seasons ago against Joe Anderson Brito, who is a better striker than him on the feet, and then takes him down multiple times. You just have to stay safe. And I think that's the path to victory for Sabatini here. He's not the greatest striker, and he can be clipped on the feet, but I don't think Lopez has much power for him here. Lopez isn't a huge striker either, and I just think at a very high clip, we see Sabatini land multiple takedowns here and bank 7 to 10 minutes of control time easily in this fight. So all he has to do is not stick his head into a choke or something like that, not get caught, just stay safe and get his hand raised here. We're going Pat Sabatini by decision. That's the official pick. Next up, we have Benoit Saint-Denis, a minus 230 favorite. The comeback on Matt Steamroller Frevola is plus 190. Frevola is coming off that exciting first round knockout victory over my guy Drew Dober at UFC 288. Unfortunately, had to sit through and see that one in person. Didn't like to see my guy losing like that. But shout out to Matt Frevola. He's won 3 straight fights, all by first round knockout. He's basically more of a grinder, wants to mix in the takedowns, averages over 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, but he loves to bang. And we've seen him kind of fall in love with his hands recently, and it's worked for him because he is a powerful striker. Now, on the flip side, Benoit Saint-Denis is a very impressive prospect. You know, he lost his debut against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. I was actually at that one as well at UFC 267 in Abu Dhabi, where he just took a beating from dos Santos and the ref didn't stop it. It was that fight. But since then, he's really kind of evolved and really been impressive over this run here. He's won 4 straight fights and he's finished all of his opponents. He's actually only gone the distance that one time, but he's just got a very aggressive style. He breaks his opponents with that smothering pace because he's going to look to land takedowns. He averages multiple takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's an aggressive submission grappler, and he just has the cardio to do that for 15 minutes if needed here. Now, where I think this is a good matchup for him is because of that pace and pressure, but also I don't think Frevola is going to be able to have that big moment on the feet or be able to find a knockout because Saint-Denis is extremely durable. So I just think this is one where it's going to be close in the beginning, but eventually Saint-Denis probably breaks him down the stretch and gets the finish. We're going Saint-Denis by submission. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have Mackenzie Dern, a minus 192 favorite. The comeback on Jessica Andrade is plus 160. And this is a really interesting matchup because obviously on one hand, we have Mackenzie Dern, who's a high-level submission grappler, probably one of the best submission grapplers across any female weight class, but she also has never had good wrestling. She struggles to get the fight to the ground at times, and that's always going to be a concern for her. And we have seen her striking start to develop over her last few fights to where now, you know, she outstruck Angela Hill to a decision in a main event in her last fight. A lot of people weren't expecting her to win a decision there, you know, thinking she's only winning by submission in a lot of these fights. Now, that's the positive and the negative with her. The negative with Andrade is that multiple times we've seen her against some of these better grapplers in grappling exchanges just look absolutely clueless. Basically, she's giving up takedowns for free almost at times. And then once she gets taken down and she's against people who know what they're doing on the mat, she's just not interested in fighting off submissions, just taps out and calls it a night. So that's always the concern with her. But I do have a little bit of interest in terms of DraftKings because we've seen multiple times fights where Dern wasn't able to get it to the mat, and that's where it started to get really dicey for her on the feet. And if that happens against a fighter who does carry the power that Andrade has, Andrade certainly has the upside to hurt her here. So I think it's one that you probably want exposure to both sides on DraftKings. I'm going to lean with Dern by submission. I want no part of that money line price tag, but I am going to look to target both sides on DraftKings. Which brings us to the first of 2 title fights. And what's fun is that both of these fights are lined competitively. So all 4 of these fighters are in that mid-range. The mid-range is loaded. We have 13 fights. It's a really fun slate on DraftKings. I mentioned $200,000 to first place. So it's a big week for DraftKings. And I do like the way that pricing shook out because of these 2 title fights. So the first one is Tom Aspinall. He's a minus 118 small favorite. The comeback on Sergey Pavlovich is minus 102. And this is just an awesome matchup. I'm super excited for this fight. And it's for the heavyweight strap, obviously. Pavlovich is one scary dude. I mean, this is a guy, he is absolutely murdering people when he gets inside the octagon with them. You know, he's very powerful. We know what he's looking to do is he's just looking for that one opening to land one of his big hammers. And once he gets you hurt, which a lot of times it only takes one, then he's like a dog with a bone where he's hunting the finish. Once he has you hurt, the fight's basically over in a matter of seconds because he's going to start swinging those hammers relentlessly to get you out of there. But the downside with him, and this is one thing watching back, I actually watched every one of these guys' fights at the UFC level. Didn't take long because they were all first rounders for the most part. So one thing I noticed is that Pavlovich, even though I mentioned the brutal power and stuff, there are multiple things that I think a guy like Aspinall can take advantage of. For starters, the leg kicks are absolutely free against him. He's very heavy on that lead leg. Basically, nobody that he's fought has taken advantage of that. Aspinall is a guy who we know repeatedly throws those leg kicks. So I think that's going to be one of the areas. The other thing is that Pavlovich, even though he's so powerful, he's kind of plodding a little bit. And in a couple of those striking exchanges, you saw he was a step behind, even in that Abdurakhimov fight where he was getting pieced up a little bit and he just couldn't find his range. Now, once he did, it only took one shot, obviously. But I just think against a guy like Aspinall, who's going to be a lot more agile, who's going to be a lot faster, better footwork, switching stances, he's pretty solid defensively, where I could see a world where Pavlovich is just missing repeatedly and he just can't find Aspinall. Whereas Aspinall, the former boxer, is going to be piecing him up with a jab, working the body. And then obviously the big path to victory, if he goes for it, is going to be the ground game. Tom Aspinall, we've seen him go to his grappling more recently. He holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think that's a clear path to victory for him here, because the only time we saw anybody look to grapple or even clinch up with Pavlovich was that Alistair Overeem fight where he clinched him up against the fence for a couple minutes. It was Pavlovich's UFC debut, and even just from the pummeling up against the fence, Pavlovich looked tired. He looked like he did not want to be there, and then it kind of confused him to where then he was shooting takedowns on Overeem. Like, I think because we haven't seen Pavlovich in that spot recently, people just think he's like an auto knockout, can't grapple him, there's no downside. I disagree. I think Aspinall's a smart fighter. He has the skill set to do it. If he just can clinch him up, take some of that wind out of his sails, so to speak, and then take him down. When Pavlovich was taken down against Overeem, didn't look to get back up, looked super tired, and just kind of shelled up and got finished. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to happen every time you get this guy down, but I think you have a guy in Aspinall that basically has all of the upside if he uses the leg kicks, if he uses his speed advantage, if he uses the clinch, if he takes him down, uses his well-rounded skill set. And then even if he throws all that out the window, I think it's a coin flip, high variance, heavyweight fight where either guy can win by knockout. So it's one where there's going to be some risk here, but I'm okay with accepting that because I think all of the upside is on my guy Tom Aspinall here. We're going Aspinall by TKO. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our main event for the light heavyweight strap, as Alex Pereira is a minus 122 favorite. The comeback on Yuri Prochazka is plus 102. And Prochazka's coming off about a 16 month layoff since he last fought. He fought Glover Teixeira, submitted him in the 5th round, and then vacated the belt. And now Pereira made his light heavyweight debut against Jan Blachowicz. Honestly, looked kind of uninspiring in that fight. I bet him in that fight. I didn't really feel confident going to decision there. Ended up getting it done, but I'm not even sure he won that fight, to be honest with you. And I thought he looked a little bit slower, with the added muscle, added weight. I don't know. I got to see more from him here to feel confident that he should be a favorite, even though it's small, for the light heavyweight strap after just one fight in the light heavyweight division. And then on the flip side, Yuri Prochazka, he's a much more active fighter on the feet. He's got just as much knockout upside, in my opinion. Both of these guys can be clipped. I think Prochazka has a durability concern because we have seen him knocked out. We have seen him wobbled multiple times, and you're going up against a guy like Pereira who does have clear knockout power, can catch you at any moment. But I just think it's one where Prochazka is going to be doing more. Prochazka, I think, has the better gas tank as well. It's not like a fully convicted take. Like my Aspinall pick, I'm convicted in Tom Aspinall this week. This one, I'm kind of not all the way there, but I do lean Prochazka. So I'm just trying to give you guys a sense of how confident I am between the two. So very confident in Aspinall, slightly confident in Yuri Prochazka. I think it's Prochazka or pass. We're going Prochazka by TKO. That's the official pick. As always, fightnumbers.com will have my DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier. It'll have my ownership projections as well. It's completely free. I'll pin it in the comments. Thanks for watching. Best of luck, and we'll see you guys next time.